All right, I'd like to open this meeting of the Pittsburgh City Commission, Tuesday, June 28th. If everyone would join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
All right, I'd like to welcome Father Jerome Spexarth with Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church for the prayer.
Thank you, Mayor. My prayer is going to be very simple. It's not anything that I came up with. It was something that Jesus gave to us. So, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
Holy Spirit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
All right, moving on to public input. If there's anyone who would like to speak, step up to the podium, state your name, address, and you have 5 minutes to speak. Come right ahead.
I'm Alyssa Dungan. I live at 402 Thomas Street. I'm here tonight. First, I would like to thank the zoning board for their unanimous decision when they honored the mission statement of the zoning board. They honored the regulations that are set in place. They honored the ordinances that are put in place, and I just want to thank them for their unanimous decision on the cell phone tower that is pending at 401 Thomas Street. And I'm here tonight to ask the same of you, to just please preserve the residential integrity of Random Acres. It's a residential community. Like I said last week, it's country living right in Pittsburgh. It's no place for a cell phone tower. And it's sickening when I think of sitting in my backyard by my koi pond watching the sunset through a cell phone tower. And that's exactly what this means for us. It's 200 feet from our backyard. We'll be there 24 years in July. We didn't make a home and then expect something like this. It's just too much. And when you speak to the attorney for this Texas company, I think there's just some basic questions that we deserve answers to. Why are they not able to co-locate on the tower that's less than a mile away by La Quinta Inn? Why are they not able to co-locate on the cell phone tower that's 6 miles south of Pittsburgh at the junction of 103 Highway and 69? Why are they not able to co-locate? Why is this particular location so important? We deserve the answer to that. And then we just deserve another basic answer. It's just general physics. If you drop a brick in a bucket of water, you get the same outcome every single time. This land has consistently flooded as long as we've lived in our home. You're putting a cell phone tower, a platform, generators, air conditioners, fencing, guide wires, and who knows what else into the bucket of water at 401 Thomas Street. What will happen with that water? I don't think anyone has studied that or anyone can answer that question. But I can tell you in the 24 years we've been in our home, we have never had water in our home from flooding. We have never had water in our shop building from flooding. But I don't think anybody can guarantee me that won't happen putting that brick in that bucket. And I don't know why that company would want to put a cell phone tower in that particular location. Why is it imperative that it goes right there? There is all kinds of rural land just south of that piece of property. All kinds. There's many, many options for a cell phone tower, including co-location, which is done all over in major cities. So why is it imperative that a cell phone tower go in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and be 200 feet from my backyard? So I'm just asking all of you, please put yourself in my shoes and imagine sitting in your backyard and looking at a cell phone tower. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Would you state your name and your address, please?
Hi, I am Billy Newland and I live at 401 Thomas. I would like to thank you to the Pittsburgh City Commission for hearing our appeal this evening and for your thoughtful consideration of this issue. I would like to address some of the concerns that were brought to light during the last meeting on this issue and take this time to discuss the consequences of granting our request. During our last meeting, one neighbor posed the question, how would you feel if someone were to build a tower near your yard? I would like to reframe this question in a way that acknowledges the context of this particular case. How would you feel if someone were to build a tower near your property in the same line of sight as a pre-existing tower and a large number of busy, visually unappealing businesses? The issue at hand isn't whether a given person living in a quiet, secluded, and woodsy area might wish for a cell tower to be built near their home, subsequently harming the aesthetic qualities of the area and upending the peace and serenity the land previously afforded them. The issue is whether it is reasonable for this commission to approve the construction of a tower that will, in many ways, resemble the features of the land as it is already, while also enabling a family to use their property productively to their own benefit, as well as to the benefit of the community as a whole. In light of this, I would like to point out a couple of things. First, for more than a decade, this same plot of land was zoned for commercial use rather than residential use. In that time, had someone decided to buy it for commercial purposes, it is fair to say that some amount of development on the land would have been very likely, the extent of which we cannot fully know. By comparison, this kind of development is relatively low impact. It will not attract a significant amount of traffic to the area, open it up to visitors from the mall, or cause anyone to be consistently present in the area in the way a business might. Moreover, the aesthetic qualities of the area will not fundamentally change. Looking west from the southeast corner of the property, you can already see the following. Another cell phone tower next to La Quinta Inn on South Broadway. The mall, its accompanying traffic, and the facility's dumpsters. Ron's Supermarket, and Papa Top Car Wash. Facing east from the same corner of the property, you will see one neighbor's brush pile, a building that is presently used for storage, an immobile vehicle that has been parked in the same place for a number of years. Moreover, it is important to note that the property we currently occupy was, for more than a decade prior to our arrival, largely unmaintained and overgrown. It was frequently used as a dumping area for people who lived nearby to dispose of brush and yard waste, something that only ended when we arrived and cleaned up the existing mess ourselves. I am also aware that some of you may have concerns about health-related issues. However, this seems to be another case in which the anticipated harms are either, one, exaggerated, or two, already existent. Though the exact effects of living near a cell phone tower are to some extent uncertain, I take solace in information made available by the American Cancer Society stating, quote, "At this time, there's no strong evidence that exposure to RF, radio frequency waves from cell phone towers, causes any noticeable health effects." If living near a cell phone tower was known to be dangerous, then why would the city of Pittsburgh allow another one to exist less than a mile away? Why would it approve commercial developments in this tower's vicinity in recent memory? Finally, as you all surely recognize, it is both common and preferable for planning commissions to favor property owners' ability to put their land to productive use. In this case, it would be of significant use to us as a family by providing significant income to us and any future property owner here. In addition, this development would be of use to anyone in the vicinity whose cell phone service could improve as a result of the tower's construction. This might be especially useful to those on the outlying areas of town whose service is often inconsistent. Thank you for taking the time to reconsider this issue. Hopefully, the information I've presented will give you sufficient cause to approve the construction of this tower on our property, as it is unlikely to have any significant effect on residents in the area.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Hempstead. I'm with GSS. I represent U.S. Sailor here in this matter, and thank you for letting me talk. Great points have been brought up so far, but I want to bring up some other ones real briefly. When we received the letter of denial, it was on a timely aspect, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, it left something major out. It left the reasons for denial that are required by federal statute. So I'm here appealing a decision that I don't know why it was denied. That the federal law does not tolerate and does not accept as a reasonable answer. I'm going to do my best from secondhand information. What we heard possibly was the issues at this previous meeting. One, that there's a 21-inch forced main close to the proposed cell tower. Two, that the visual impact of the cell tower to the neighborhood. Three, home values that would be potentially affected by the cell tower. And radio frequency safety. I'm going to go real quick to stay within my 5 minutes. My speech would have been a little bit longer. 21 force main, that one, there was concern that the cell tower may have been a little too close to that. In the zoning application we submitted, we actually called out the easement that you guys have for that force main. We are outside of that easement. We are outside of that by approximately 5 feet from lease area to the corner of the easement. Any drilling that would occur approximately 35 to 39 feet away from the edge of the easement. So if the force main is in the easement that is recorded at the courthouse, there should not be an issue. If it is outside of that, that's an issue between the city and the landlord, or the landowners, the Mr. and Mrs. Newland. Second, visual impact. The concern of a cell tower being placed around or near someone's property is called NIMBY, not in my backyard. Federal law has sided with the carriers consistently, saying NIMBY is not a valid reason for denial, as carriers are required to have towers in certain areas, and no doubt, no matter where it's placed, it's going to be in somebody's backyard. So that would make it almost impossible to place a cell tower. We worked with the city on this one. They were well aware of this development. This was not a surprise. We met the ordinance. We have a fall zone letter for the tower. We understand this is conditional use permit for residential, but it's a conditional use permit in any district as of the way your zoning ordinance reads today. As Mrs. Newland stated, if this had still been commercial, would this be an issue is the question I have. It shouldn't be. It should not make a difference one way or the other, whether it's residential or commercial. Also, Mr. Newland, I believe, sent a letter to the city requesting that possibly the board go out and visit the site and take a look at it. And as you're driving down Thomas, I did this today. I drove down there to see what would be the impact visually. Would there be some impact? Yes, but we believe, as do the Newlands, that this has been placed in an area that is least impactful. We pushed it back along 2 tree lines. The trees on the back at 402, I believe it's 402 Thomas Street, I understand that they are the closest person to the tower, but the trees in their backyard are almost 45 to 60 feet tall, and at an angle to see that tower, other than at the ground level, would be very difficult. And at the ground level, although it's not required, we are putting in a white vinyl fence to hide the ground equipment. So we are doing everything we can to make this the least impactful location. If we put it in the original location, which would have been a little bit closer to the mall, first off, it would have been in a flood area, which would not have been attractive, but it would have been even more visible to more people. Regarding the flood area, this tower is not proposed in the flood zone. We are outside the flood zone, so we are not adding a brick to that part. That is one thing that we made sure of, and that's one of the other reasons that drove us to that area, is to keep it outside the floodplain. Yes, we are elevating our equipment as required, just to make sure that if the floodplain ever changes, which FEMA has been doing on a regular basis, that we will always be above base flood elevation with our equipment to protect the equipment from an insurance standpoint. Property values. It's understanding that there may be some concerns regarding property values. There are no studies that are looked upon in today's society that will back the fact that cell towers decrease value. And I can't sit here and tell you legally that they wouldn't decrease. The studies are inconclusive. There's nothing. So if I sat here and told you, no, your house won't lose value because the cell towers will be there, I would be incorrect and I would be lying to you. That's why they don't allow that as a reason for denial. It's just not something that can be fact-based. And that's what all decisions regarding a CUP denial of a cell tower per the communications law says, that they must be fact-based. Radio frequency, RF exposure. Vince here is going to hand out some documentation that we provided. The FCC federally regulates what is considered unsafe in regard to radio frequency exposure. In most cases, anything that is taller than 10 meters, that's 33.5 feet, is exempt unless the cumulative amount of frequency RF exceeds a certain level. That's very rare, but it does occur. And that's typically at the lower levels of 35, 40, 50 feet. So all carriers are required to do what's called an MPE analysis, maximum permissible exposure analysis. And we have completed one on this site, and we meet and exceed the minimum requirements of federal health and safety. The reason that it is not an allowable reason for denial of a CUP is because the federal government does not allow the local jurisdictions, whether it be county, state, city, village, township, anything, because this is something the federal government regulates. They are the ones that are setting the limits. And as long as we meet those limits, it's something that is out there, and it is something that we abide by. And every carrier, not just USA, but every carrier is very sensitive to this, because RF frequency exposure is a very hot topic, especially in the world of small cells that are going on today. So we make sure that we are meeting the guidelines on that.
All right, I'm gonna hold you right there, only because we'll have a public hearing and you'll be able to speak again here with anything that you haven't been able to
I
say.
apologize.
Oh, no, don't apologize. I just wanted you to know that, just
No,
keeping
that's fine.
it to the
I just wanted to
five.
be able to answer
I hate to cut
questions.
people off, but,
No, that's
you
okay.
are gonna be, you'll have plenty of time to talk too. I would
Sure.
allow that, so.
Okay, I'll hold off right there.
I appreciate it.
bet.
Thank you very much. All right,
My name is Justin Dungan. I live at 4002 Thomas with my wife. I've been their co-owner for 24 years. And yeah, as we spoke, during the appeals or during the first zoning meeting, I mean, I'm gonna keep this short, but just, try to put yourself in our shoes. And then really until you've been there 24 years, you really don't understand completely what it's like to have that, nice neighborhood and that atmosphere. For one, I ask, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it's a smaller neighborhood. But what will the roads support? I mean, there are more narrow roads anyway, as it is, and what kind of traffic's going to be coming in and out of there? It was a dead-end street for years. Mr. Rhodes with Rhodes Grocery had it, as we know, that lot, and it was commercial. As we know, there's a lot of unknown. What would have been done with it? And then for two, just what I always try to do is put myself in everybody's shoes before you make a decision, before you come to an agreement, and put ourselves in their shoes. Mr. and Mrs. Newland, I'm sure they're gaining a monetary value, some monetary, for having a cell phone tower. And then my next question is put ourselves in the shoes of the cell phone company. And I'm not for sure exactly why they're dead set on this specific location. Maybe we'll find out. As my wife mentioned, there's plenty of rural land to the south that's not necessarily in somebody's backyard per se. But maybe we'll find out exactly, is it also has something to do with monetary, value? Is there a specific reason why they're just dead set on that specific location? That's all I have, thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? All right, we're gonna close public input and move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed?
Item C,
Steve? Okay. All right. Item A, approval of the June 14th, 2022 City Commission meeting minutes. Item B, approval of the application submitted by Harold Leroy Smith for a cereal malt beverage license in the annual celebration to honor the life of Brandon Smith to be held at the Frisco Event Center, 210 East 4th Street, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturday, July 30th, 2022. Item D, approval of the appropriation ordinance for the period ending June 28, 2022, subject to the release of HUD expenditures when funds are received. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Chuck, double second by Ron and Stu. Roll call vote?
Brooks,
Yes?
Height,
Yes.
McNay,
yes,
Munsell,
Yes.
Sigley.
Yes.
I apologize. Dawn McNay is on the phone. She's not with us tonight, but I forgot to say that. All right. Item C, approval of staff request to submit an application to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program for the grant in the amount of $100,000 to be used to provide security deposit assistance to income-eligible households and authorization for the mayor to sign the appropriate documents on behalf of the city.
Yeah, Quentin, explain a little bit about this grant. How many people will this help out with?
Well, I have some stats here. It's hard to say how many people it will help, just because security deposits are different amounts depending on the residence that someone is renting. But I can tell you, we can go up to $700.
Yeah, you got down here, it's gonna help out 270 extreme low-income households with security deposits.
It,
So,
it can.
yeah, and 700 is the max.
$700, yes.
And administration funding for this 100,000 would be how much? Over 3 years?
Yeah, I'd have to look. I don't have that.
$7,000. A couple other questions. The purpose program tenants who fall at or below 30% of the median income, the proposed number of homeless, disabled, elderly, single-parent households, and those paying over 50% of their income from rent. And I look back in here, and what is this census per capita income, Crawford County? So anybody making $23,936 is low income,
They would be considered low income.
and the medium income is $42,615. So this deposit must be used with other rental subsidies.
It can. It does not have to be.
It doesn't
no.
have to be? All right, and then I seen in here too, so it says the number of Section 8 or TBRA tenants from the previous year who have moved to Section 8 programs or to self-sufficiency should be indicated. How many people have moved to that?
I'd have to get those numbers for you.
Can you have them by next meeting or sometime?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Is $100,000 usual, or is that? it
Yeah,
sounds
that's
like-
what we got last year.
That's what you got
as
last
well.
year?
Yeah.
And the waiting list, are you able to help everybody who's on the list?
Not, it's all a unique
I
situation.
didn't know if it runs out fast and all of a sudden,
Well, we're still, it's for 3 years.
Oh, for 3
We have
years.
100,000 for 3 years, and we're still on the 2020 grant. And just so you are aware on numbers, we've assisted so far on the 2020 grant, 223 families.
nice.
Then I'm reading back here, a description of other methods to be used to measure the success of this program. What are those measures?
I'm sorry, I was writing, say that again.
Page 18, tenant-based rental assistance.
I don't have that in front of me.
Could you get that by next meeting?
What was the question?
Are you asking me a question? or
How
a
many, description of methods used to measure the success of the program? What are the methods that you use?
Quentin, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you apply for a grant like this? Why would the city of Pittsburgh want to do this?
To help those in need.
Thank you.
And it does helping people, I guess, get successful when they move on
Sure.
out of this program.
Yeah, it, helps with security deposit, so generally when someone goes to rent a house, it's first month's rent and security deposit. When they're having trouble, with obviously coming up with rent and need subsidy, this is as just another way to help them be able to afford that.
I have another question, and it says on page 21, will comply with the lead paint requirements of 24 CFR Part 35. How do you do that? Is there some?
We have a certification for that. Our HQS inspector handles that.
That's all the questions I have.
I'd move to approve.
Right, I have a motion. Thank you, Quentin.
Yeah.
For answering those.
Yep.
I have a motion by Sue to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Don. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. All right, public hearing. The City of Pittsburgh advertised for a public hearing to be held on Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 at 5:30 PM in the City Commission Room located in the Law Enforcement Center at 201 North Pine to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals decision to deny the petition for a conditional use permit to allow a communication tower at 401 Thomas. Well, hold on here a second. Let me get to the page here. Sorry about that. Okay, so we need to open the hearing. So do I need a motion to open it?
No.
No, okay, so we're gonna open the hearing. And so if anyone would like to come forward, is that the procedure, Henry?
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Brooks,
Yes?
I don't know what the mechanics are, but is there a way for previous, presentations to be part of the public hearing, since they were under public comment? I don't know if it matters.
Oh, I think they should. Is that, is that what you're under?
Yeah, I mean, you've already heard some of
Yes.
the testimony from the folks.
Right.
Yeah, if you would like that to be reflected as part of the public hearing.
Okay, all right. And so with the gentleman who didn't finish, could he
Yes.
extend on
Finish.
there? Thank you.
Again, I am sorry for that earlier.
Oh, no, no problem.
So some of the other questions that were asked that I want to address, and hopefully to the satisfaction of everybody, is, first one is traffic. The construction time is when most of the traffic will occur at the cell site. Construction takes about 2 to 2.5 months. It's not every day. It comes in waves. They have to pour concrete. Very similar to building a house. There's not somebody hammering there every day, but there are people there certain times. After that, and the cell site is turned on air, typically they visit the site maybe once every 6 months. Sometimes sooner if there's problems, but typically that would be what the traffic increase would be at the site. Second one was why this location? And I only have 2 copies of these, so I apologize for this. May I approach?
Sure.
Okay. It's really kind of hard to see.
Do we want to use the projector?
Do you have a projector? there?
Or
Right next to you.
is-
Yeah.
is that possible?
It's on.
Is that the same one that's in the
Wait,
packet
wait.
already?
Do we have that picture in our packet?
I think, is this what he's talking about, Don?
That's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
It's the same
44.
packet.
But it'd be good to, everybody else that's watching can kind of get an idea where this is gonna be.
So
Or it
it's,
might be.
it's really hard to see on there, but there's a blue circle, kind of goes right around the pin that says Via Christi. That was the targeted area. When we were given a cell site to develop, they give us a location, and they give us a ring, and say, we just need something in this general area. So that was the approximate area. We've reached out to other candidates in the area. They either said no, they weren't interested, they didn't respond. We did have one other candidate that showed interest, Ken Brock. He had 2 locations we looked at, but we were not able to get access for construction to his site. We tried so many different things and we just could not do it. So we moved on. We contacted the New Orleans, and we also submitted the ATC site, which it's kind of hard to see over there. We submitted that to RF as well. RF denied that one. It was
What does
just
ATC stand for?
American Tower Corporation.
Okay.
They're the tower owners that have the one by the hotel. We did submit that to them, and it was too far outside the ring for the RF engineer for the area they're trying to cover. In today's world, back in the day, I'm gonna give a real quick explanation. 30 years ago, TDMA was the concept. You went 400 feet high, you blasted super high wattage, and you didn't care if your coverage overlapped, you hit just as far as you can so that phone coverage would go as far as possible. The next stage was CDMA, they took TDMA down. CDMA was a little bit more sensitive, but it was also done at lower power. They moved on to LTE. LTE is the same thing, it brought it even more. So, all the 3G, 4G, 5G, they're all much more frequency sensitive, and some of the frequencies they use don't travel as far. So that's why they have to be in particular locations, and they're trying to offload many of the sectors of the existing sites that are here. I have them on another sheet. We do have one tower in the downtown area, and then a site off to the southwest that's called Pittsburgh. It's out probably, that's what, about 2 miles?
Yeah, I don't have that.
About 2.5 miles. So the site 6 miles away would do no good. You know, we're already covering that.
Where's the downtown area one? Is that by the railway?
Here you go. Yeah, but there we go, that's what I'm looking for. So this is the current cell site right there that they have in the downtown. We also are in the process of building another cell site at Lincoln Park with the city that will also help the coverage in the town. We're also building one site north near the county line off of 169, I think it is, it goes up north, to improve coverage.
What are them sites zoned for?
I couldn't tell you, the park was zoned industrial maybe, or
Not residential though.
not sure. I just couldn't tell you.
The Thomas Street one?
No,
Or-
I'm talking about the ones that we all.
Oh,
The one that's over in Lincoln Park with the golf course and baseball diamonds. I wasn't sure what that's.
Jay?
How far apart do towers have to be to adequately serve what's necessary?
It all depends on capacity, the need, the data capacity. And that's the other thing I was gonna talk about. I was in here earlier when you were talking about growth of water and the water needs and what happens if the population grows or business comes to town. Very understandable questions. Our data growth is happening without companies coming to town, without population growth. Data growth is continuing, and to maintain those speeds, they need more sectors. Each tower typically has 3 sectors that serve in approximately 120-degree different directions. And without that, your data speeds slow down. You drop calls, you drop data sessions.
Well, you're showing here a tower in the Lincoln Park region that's less than 3 miles.
Yeah. I right now in the process of building 130 sites for US Cellular across the country. I'm building sites that are within a mile of each other. Sometimes depending on the capacity and the density of the people that are there, or if there's large businesses or stadiums or high volume venues, there are needs. I'm building, like I said, 2 sites within a mile of each other, and odds are they're gonna be putting a small cell network in there eventually too. Pittsburgh has, US Cellular has seen immense growth within the city of Pittsburgh from a data standpoint.
We have boosters around the city of Pittsburgh to boost the signal. So why couldn't that help with the tower?
Well, boosters don't work with cell phones and data and LTE.
So what's the booster for?
I'm sorry?
What's the booster we have for then? Not for cell phones?
That's more for, you're talking about an in-building system possibly?
What is it?
what, are you talking about DragonNet, or what are you talking
No,
about?
we had them, like, there's one at the football stadium, there's one by the Sonic. I thought those were put in to boost cell phone signals.
Sometimes they'll put in what they call repeaters,
that what it is?
But again, they don't add any capacity, they just carry the signal a little bit further is all.
So that, you couldn't use
A
that.
repeater system would not be an option as well.
And I have another question since I.
Sure.
So the property owners didn't reach out to you, you reached out to all the property owners,
Correct.
and this is the best location, it's just kinda hard to understand why it's closer to the property owner that, didn't want it than the property owner that wanted it.
I can slightly address that possibly too. So one of the other conversations was flood zone. This is a FEMA map that we pulled off the coordinates of the cell tower. Right there, that orange dot is the cell tower. If you look at the rest of that, that is either a 0.25% chance or floodways, and that's why we couldn't go further south. And even part of Ken Brock's property was compromised that we had to look at. So that's why we had to, be very selective there when we were looking at his property. This just happens to be the location that we were,
And you said that flood map could change,
it can change.
So what
They
happens if
update
it
them
changed?
with
Is
all, with all the construction that does occur, floodplains change. People, our cities, towns will also put in drainage systems, which helps alleviate sometimes flood issues and kind of helps move where the water goes to, retention ponds, things like that. So FEMA typically will update their maps every 10 years, but after large floods, I'll use Iowa for example. In 2008, when Iowa had the massive floods in central Iowa, they started updating the maps right then and there because that was the best example. They saw with their own eyes their maps weren't accurate. So they are, and still, even 14 years later, they're still making corrections to the
I
map.
if the
don't- I don't
floodplain
think you're-
changed,
I'm sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
go ahead.
I don't think you're asking us to make a ruling or a decision based on what might change 10 years from now, are you? I mean, you realize that the information we're faced with right now is what we have.
Right.
It isn't a floodplain.
It's not in the flood.
The particular tower is, but the
Right.
property is.
But,
Yeah, the
but
property is.
I have a question. Why so close to a neighborhood? Why so close to a housing area? When it's pretty obvious that, if I came to your house and said, I'm gonna put this tower in your backyard, how would you feel?
I've had similar things happen to me personally, and I went and spoke at a meeting and, I exercised my rights as well, so I understand. And trust me, I empathize and understand what this means. When I lived on the north side of Ankeny, I lived within an eye shot of 4 towers that were between the heights of 1,200 feet to 2,000 feet. And this was prior to me being in the industry. I moved there prior to the industry. I didn't even notice them until I got in the industry and started observing more and more. I understand the concern that the residents at 402 have. I totally do. And it's an emotional thing, and I am not challenging that whatsoever. If I did, I would be a fool. But I think once everything is said and done, the impact won't be as bad, nearly as bad, as what is perceived in the mind. There are no guy wires on this tower. There are no anchors. This is a monopole. It is a single pole. It's not even like the tower over by the hotel, which is a self-support, which has 3 legs. This will be like some of the power poles that were up by the hotel I stayed at up at the Holiday Inn. They're right by that. Just a little bit taller. Very similar.
How many antennas will this pole hold?
This is designed to handle 4 carriers.
Yeah, I think it's 6 antennas right now.
Right, for us, but then 3 additional carriers outside of USA.
How many are you gonna have on there?
We're gonna have 6 antennas, and it's hard to say by antennas because it's more radios are more of the issue now. And every carrier could have different, it's actually done by loading. But we loaded it for 4 carriers total and 3 others and then USA.
And they can all have 6 antennas probably?
Some might have 9, some might have 1. There are some configurations I do with USA where we have 1 antenna per sector, but we maybe have only 2 radios up there.
So all those antennas won't change any of the other stuff that people are concerned with?
Nope. And they're all at a very safe distance. I use the example of this all the time. A lot of people do have concerns about RF safety, and for good reason. I work in the industry, I've been trained in RF safety. I know that if I'm on a rooftop and I'm standing in front of an antenna and I'm within 7 feet, I've got about 3 to 5 minutes of time where I can help, okay to stand there, but I need to move after about 5 minutes and get out of the way. If it's a microwave dish, I don't stand in front of it at all. I understand that. But if it's 150 feet in the air, you're actually at more risk standing in front of the microwave watching your popcorn pop than that tower is. And that's a hard concept to understand for some people. But microwave is a lot stronger signal, so that's why that is. But they are totally safe. And even as we sit in here today, we are surrounded by RF, Wi-Fi, AM, FM, public service, cell towers, different frequencies from the different carriers. We are surrounded by it. It's there.
Mayor Brooks,
Oh, yes. Yes, Don.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I was wondering if we could hear from staff as to what the discussion was.
I was kind of waiting to see, I didn't know whether Quentin or Matt would be the one, or even Jay.
And I'll sit, but I'll be willing to answer any other
Oh,
questions. that come up.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Maybe. Yes, well, both of you come,
Well, to focus the staff, so we've had, it's a public hearing. We've heard that we didn't give any reasons for the denial. We've heard from the citizens that were there on both sides. We've heard from the company. So maybe focus on why the denial. And, I don't think the denial was for RF, from what I've
No.
heard. But can we focus in on why the denial and maybe drill down on that instead
so
of just...
do we need to close the public hearing or just leave it open?
No, this is all
Okay.
part of the
All right.
public hearing.
My
Yeah,
only
so-
question, what's it zoned? Is it residential
It's
or
zoned
1A?
residential.
Okay, it's zoned residential.
Yeah.
So right there it's zoned residential, and if it was commercial, I could see the difference. But under Article 30, the conditional use, is there anything stating in Article 30 that means it's in a residential, is there any discrepancies there, Jay? Or
Yeah, that is the purpose of the conditional use.
Right,
Is to
so-
do something outside of the zone that it is.
All right.
And the Planning and Zoning Committee found unanimously 6-0 to deny the request, correct?
Yeah, and again, planning and zoning is a recommendation
Yes.
board. They do not make the final
Right.
decision. That is the city commission.
But their recommendation
was
was to deny.
denial.
Right,
And I don't
and there was a
know-
lot of discussion at that meeting.
Sure.
As far as the flooding, the fence, the generator sound that she was talking about, razor wire, and the height of the tower.
Sure.
But again, going back to, it's an R1A residential area.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a big deal right there. And,
That was my feeling. That was the overall concern.
I have a question. The area behind the mall, why can't that be utilized instead of this area next to a residential area?
further to the
We're only
south,
talking, what, maybe 400 feet, 500 feet?
Yeah.
go back to that map you had earlier that showed,
You mean the area that's in the floodplain?
This one right here, this one.
This is the more important one.
It's what?
It's the floodplain. The concerns
Well,
about.
I'm not worried about the floodplain, because you can build above the floodplain, you know that.
Right, but we just talked about, I wanted to address the fact of adding a brick to a bucket. That's part of the reason. The other map,
I would like to make the comment, if you'd like to see
Ma'am,
current.
ma'am,
go ahead.
can you at least get, if
Yeah,
you're
you
if you're not at the mic, nobody can hear you.
Yes.
I have pictures from just a few weeks ago, if you'd like to see current flooding conditions of the area and what really happens and what happens regularly. Your flood map isn't accurate. I've lived there 24 years in July. I know what the flooding looks like, I know where it's at, and I know how deep it gets.
Okay, so one thing I'm gonna say is, I don't think it's up to the city commission or any of us to decide where another location should be. The matter at hand is to decide whether or not we want to disapprove or approve the denial recommendation from planning and zoning, not where it could be or where it might be. That's a United States Cellular decision and another property owner for another day.
Yeah, and I have one other thing that, just to address something that you said, if you could expand on it. You said there was nothing, there were no studies about property depreciation and such. If you go to the Housing and Urban Development website, what do they call a cell tower?
Communication tower, cell
No, they
phone.
do not. If someone would like to go to that website, we can read what they call a cell tower, what it does to properties, and if you have a government loan, an FHA loan, a VA loan, anything like that, you have to have a special, you can go to the website and read it. I read it right before I came here.
Well, I just didn't know if you brought
Yeah.
anything to show, because I don't.
I didn't. I mean, if anyone can pull up the website, but they call them a nuisance.
Well, I
They
think
call them a hazard, and if you have a government-backed loan and you require an appraisal, it requires a special appraisal because of this cell tower.
I believe that's if the cell tower's on your property, I could be wrong.
It's not.
the property value
And the
issue
property value's
is
up to
tied
20%.
if I
It's
can-
been shown.
If I can
it's
try to just
staggering.
add something.
Yeah.
The zoning is what protects, that's why we have zoning,
Right.
to protect property values. We're not gonna sit in here and be able to discuss whether or not it's
Right,
going
and I
down.
understand that, but I
It's
just.
zoned
yeah.
residential, so we don't bring in something that affects
I mean, you can go
negatively.
anywhere online and find things to support this and find things to support that. The information's out there. There's just as much information about health hazards out there as there are not health hazards. If you go outside the United States of America, there's all kinds of information because the FCC has not updated cell tower regulations in 25 years. When those regulations were put in place, there were less than 500 cell towers. It's now nearly 500,000 and growing exponentially, just like he said, by the day, and nothing regulation-wise has been updated since there were 500 rural cell towers in this country.
Okay,
That's
if we could get
just
back to the matter at hand,
yeah.
though, I mean, I think we all appreciate the value and use of cell phones in our society. I think we all have one, we all depend on it, but again, that's not the matter up to debate right now. I think we need to get back to the purpose of the hearing, and if there was anything else from either side,
How do I get back to this?
that's a great question.
Well, I'd just like to comment, it's not being at that planning zoning meeting, and you said that there was never a reason given why it was denied. It sounds like I've heard plenty of reasons from the citizens why they were there. I guess they were there and spoke.
I was there.
Well, I will tell you, that's not what I said.
Okay.
What I said
Correct.
was, when a recommendation for denial is made, federal law requires that, and I will read it verbatim so I don't mess it up. Any decision by a state or local government or instrumentality thereof to deny a request to place, construct, or modify a personal wireless service facility, which if you want, I'll read the definition of that, which.
No, I'd just like to stop you there because the planning and zoning didn't make that recommendation.
Okay.
They made a recommendation to come to us, and we have to approve or disapprove, so they couldn't have done one way or the other. It's up to the commission to take the recommendation that's unanimous decision, and we have to decide what's best. So I guess if we decide one way or the other, then we have to turn this into the federal government? Why it was denied?
I apologize, the letter didn't say that we would be on another commission to have this looked at. It says, voted to disapprove the conditional use permit submitted for a communications tower.
But the planning and zoning serves at our will. That's why we have people on that
Right.
and
So
listen
this
to
is the
people
fo-
like you
so
and listen to the
They
neighbors.
didn't say that
and then
this
they
would
make a
go on to another
recommendation
board,
to
so
bring
this
to
is
us.
considered the final say.
To us, yes.
To us, because unless we appealed, it wouldn't have come to you, correct?
Well, I assume so, but what I'm trying to say is
I'm asking.
Yes.
that was just a recommendation for us to, like you
This
said,
doesn't sound
you
like
can
It
appeal.
doesn't say it was recommended for disapproval, it says it was voted to disapprove. That is a final thing, so when we are given a final thing, a final decision, it has to meet federal requirements.
So the
which
city would have to do
says
that.
that you also have, must be in writing and supported by substantial evidence contained in a written record, which we've requested the minutes, we requested I'm sure this is all recorded, you have fantastic, audio here. We asked for a transcript so that we could hear and capture everything to put together, the argument, to hopefully answer all the questions.
So Henry, is this something that falls under you as far as that they followed the guidelines?
Unfortunately, I've not been contacted by anyone from the tower company prior to this presentation this evening. I have no idea, what federal law is being cited here. In my analysis right now, just like Commissioner Mansell says, this is an appeal, this is an opportunity to hear the evidence. Once again, it's your opportunity to make a decision on this matter.
And to add to that, I think part of your appeal is, Shane, is that we didn't notify you properly. And so I think that's been noted. And the question for you is that going to be something that's going to sway the decision that you want to make, if you want to make one tonight? And either way, we're going to need to follow up with Shane and figure out where we went awry in the process. And I don't think it will change. I would guess that not following that wouldn't change the decision you're going to make tonight, but I think that's part of the appeal process, and I've noted it, that wasn't followed to your.
Well, the appeal will be, with the next steps, the appeal obviously is the next step, and depending on how this comes out, then we have 30 days to make a decision on litigation. That's basically where it boils down to.
Right.
But I do want to just make one last comment. When reading the zoning ordinance, like I said earlier, you don't differentiate between residential, commercial, industrial, when it comes to conditional use permit and communications towers. If the intent is to keep them out of residential areas, I would recommend amending the ordinance. That's the gift that cities, towns, states, counties, whatever, are given to give companies like us clear guidance on how we can best fit into the rules. That's not there. We followed the rules that were in there.
And the
We met
reason-
the guidelines. So
And we
I'm
understand
sorry it
that.
was in residential, but it would have been no different if it had been commercial. It was commercial up until the Newlands bought it, my understanding is.
And the reason, and that's a good point, the reason that we have that flexibility is because of things like this. It's a new market. We have the ability to go through, and you can sit there and smirk.
Well,
And
it's-
I'd appreciate you to let
It's
me finish.
dangerous. It's a dangerous
I know it's
flexibility.
inconvenient for
That's the
you.
only thing.
I know it's
Let's be honest.
inconvenient for you, Shane, because you have to go through and jump through this hoop. But allowing us the flexibility to make these decisions is the whole point of it. So
And I understand.
apologize that
I'll
it's not in
and I
black and
respect
white. Thank you.
So,
So, Mayor Brooks?
Yes.
Is it the recommendation of Henry and Darren that we table this and vote on it next time in order to give the required
does,
time?
as far as the planning and zoning, you're saying that they need to present why in writing? Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying.
No,
I would
no, I
recommend.
meant, I was trying to.
Yeah, Don, I would recommend, I don't see anything that said the plans and zoning, their decision was based on our inability to follow a federal regulation that we didn't know anything about. I think the plans and zoning has made a very clear recommendation, and so the question for you is if you want to table it, to send us back to get more information, we'd be happy to, but obviously we have an appointed board that's the plan that was unanimous. I think they make good decisions, and I think on this one, the record states that the reason they did it is the neighbors had a problem with it and it's zoned R1A.
I would also like to note that I've had more contact from private citizens on this matter personally, as a commissioner, either by email or phone call, about asking me to, abide by the planning and zoning's recommendation than anything else since I've been elected in November. So I feel like I have a pretty good feel for how the private citizens feel about this matter, so.
I think we've all had them call Stu, and I'd make a motion, if there's no further question, to deny this request.
I'd second it.
I hear your motion, I hear your second. I was at,
Excuse me, Mayor, I think the public hearing's
Yeah,
still.
we're still
oh,
in the-
I'm sorry. So, do I
Close the public
close it?
hearing.
Okay,
Unless, I'd ask one more time if anybody has anything
okay.
else that would.
Does
say.
anyone else have anything else to say? Okay, I'm closing the public hearing. All right, I was at this meeting, and there was a lot of discussion, and they did, because here was my notes from when I was there that night, and I wrote down about, they talked about the flooding, the chain link fence, the generator, the razor wire, but most of all, the R1A zoning was the one that I thought was the most important. And Chuck has a motion, and Stu has a second, and I fully support the P and Z's decision that night. So I would like to, Dawn, do you have anything to say?
I just want to add, I have also heard from citizens, but the other thing that I'm basing my decision on is egress, into that area through that neighborhood with those narrow streets. So.
All right,
Well, again, you're asking for something that is unusual in a residential area, and I personally feel that it's not necessary. It should be moved someplace else or somehow another access somewhere outside the residential area.
all right, so we have a motion and a second on the table to approve the planning and zoning's motion to deny the petition for a conditional use permit to allow a communication tower at 401 Thomas. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion passes. Okay. I don't think they got for that one.
I'd be interested in knowing about that violation.
All right. Special presentation, Economic Development Quarterly Report. Director of Economic Development, Blake Benson, and Pittsburgh State University Director of External Engagement, Chad Mishmash, will present the quarterly economic development report.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. As members of the economic development team with the city of Pittsburgh here, it's my pleasure on behalf of the chamber and Chad Mishmash on behalf of Pittsburgh State University to bring you an economic development update and just talk about kind of the health of our local economy and some of the projects that each of our entities have been working on. So tee up our presentation here for the folks watching at home. So first of all, just want to look at some numbers that we traditionally bring you. First of all, the unemployment rate, it's a good indicator of your local economy's health. Most people are familiar with this. You see the May 2022 numbers are 2.6%. I will remind everybody that in December of 2021, we hit an all-time low in terms of unemployment rate here in Pittsburgh when it hit 2%. So it's up just a little bit since then, a little bit since April, but still well below where we were in May of 2021. So full employment is generally around 4%, so we've been at full employment in Pittsburgh for actually a number of years now. Some other numbers, these are supplied obviously by Larissa and the City Finance Department. These are fairly new numbers. The June sales tax collection numbers there, second highest ever. December was the highest ever recorded by the city of Pittsburgh. And the numbers as of June are up almost 15% over this time last year. And I'll remind you, and Larissa can throw something at me if I'm incorrect on any of this, that the 2021 numbers were up about 12% over 2020. So some pretty substantial sales tax collection growth here in the community. Some numbers that are brand new, and we're proud to bring them to you tonight. The state, once a year, updates its median wage information for each county. We just got this information a few days ago. and you see the substantial increase in the average median wage from last year to this year. That's actually median wage. Average and median aren't quite the same, so it actually should be median wage. You see the increase from 2021 to 2022. Madam Mayor, that's an increase of 22.5% in only 1 year. So that's substantial. When I found these, I forwarded them on to Darren and Jay, and Jay loves numbers like these, so he started really digging into them and found that our wage growth of that 22.5% is, while it's the 15th highest in the state, if you look at the 14 other counties, their average population was less than 3,500. So Pittsburgh is by far, when you look at population centers, we were leading the way in terms of wage growth. Jay produced another table that showed those other population centers around the state, and I apologize if that's too small. But when you look at the next closest one to us was Leavenworth County, and their wage growth was just under 9%. It really stands out that Crawford County's growth of over 22% in just 1 year, just how substantial that is compared to the other population centers around the state. So I know the City Commission obviously is very interested in numbers like that, and it shows that our community is definitely headed in the right direction. So that's good news for the employees in our community.
It's good news, Blake, since everything we buy costs us a lot more.
Certainly, and Commissioner, that's a great point. Certainly, some of that is inflation, but when you look at our numbers compared to some of the other ones around the state, it's apparent that ours also is because of growth in addition to that inflation. So if everybody were up by the same margin that we are, we would be able to say that it's inflation across the board. But we're pretty proud of how much further our numbers are ahead of the other population centers. And you can even see with some of them down toward the bottom of the table, Shawnee County, Saline County, Sedgwick County actually retreated backwards in terms of their median wage. Okay. Turn this over to you, Chad.
So I'm going to start with NEMA, so the National Institute of Material Advancement, formerly known as KPRC, or Kansas Polymer Research Center. So the first number you're going to see up there is 12. Those are new positions, high-tech, high-paying positions that we hope we can help keep driving that average wage up in the county. Those positions are being added currently, and then the rest, about a third of those are being added in here in the next few months, and then over the next 6 months, we should finish out the rest of those positions. The next number is 2. That's $2 million of new high-tech equipment that we are purchased, and this is going to allow us to do more, deeper research than we've done in the past. We've added some really cool stuff. I think Dr. Siegley's seen a few of them. We have the new electron scanning microscope, which I believe you have to go well over 300 miles outside of our area to find anything close to that. I think Ohio State, maybe UCLA have them, but you're not going to find one in the state of Kansas outside of Pittsburgh State. So very excited about that. The number 1 represents a new tenant that we have. So a company we've been working with, Checker Spot, they're a research company as well. We helped them launch. They've got some products that they're launching due to our research, joint research, and they now have a person here, based here in Kansas, and renting out lab space and doing some great work with us. So. Yeah, here's a little picture of Dr. Gupta and one of our students doing some. I don't know which piece of equipment that is, but some new updated marketing material that we're getting out. So very exciting stuff.
So a project that we enjoy talking about, Madam Mayor, is obviously the FedEx Ground Distribution Center that's being built at 69 and 400 just west of Kansas Crossing Casino. This is a 250,000 square foot distribution center. I talked to the developer yesterday, and he said despite the supply chain issues that everybody is facing, this project is on schedule. Structurally, they have the building completed. They've got the walls up, the foundation poured, obviously, the roof is done, and so now they'll begin working on the parking lot, begin working on the inside of the building. Felt like they would be tied into city utilities by late July, early August, and they feel like they are still on schedule for a fall opening, because obviously the holiday season is the busiest time for them, so they still plan to be open by this fall. So it's going up very quickly, and I will again point out, really appreciate Darren and the city team for their process, or their help in getting FedEx to the point where they could meet this schedule, because when we got the first contact, I believe in March of last year, they knew they had to be open by fall of '22. We all knew it was aggressive, and so we set a 24-hour turnaround on all their information requests, and we met that every time, and that's the reason that they've been able to adhere to the schedule. So certainly a team approach.
The next one I'd like to cover is the Small Business Development Center, the SBDC, which is funded by the SBA, so we love our acronyms. Small Business Administration fully funds this. We're housed in Block 22. We serve local businesses, and so far to date, we've served 55 unique clients or customers. Spent 285 hours counseling them on business plans, creating cash flow analysis, filing their EINs, registering LLCs, market research, all that stuff. It can be new startups, it can be existing, it can be somebody that's selling a business, whatever it is. We're there free, that's all free services provided, and that's all just in the city of Pittsburgh numbers. So the last number is 3 for $3 million of capital investment in the city year to date so far. And I think that ended about the end of May. So we could have a little bit more current numbers here for you next time.
Okay. A project that you'll be hearing more about, Madam Mayor, in August. We will most likely be bringing you an incentive request on behalf of AZZ. Many people may not realize that AZZ is actually one of Pittsburgh's oldest companies. A lot of us still refer to it as Atkinson Industries. They celebrated their 100th birthday in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. And in the time that they have been here, they have just received one of the largest orders that this facility has ever received. It's 125 of the large electrical trailers that sometimes our residents will see coming down Rouse Street with a police escort. So they're very large. And so in order to meet that demand, AZZ is expanding their Pittsburgh facility. So most likely in August, the EDAC will receive a request for a property tax exemption to help with that project. And obviously, pending a favorable recommendation, we'll be bringing that to you as well. But always great when one of our longtime companies is continuing to grow.
And my final one here tonight is about Foundry at Block 22. So very excited that we have a new tenant moving in. I believe within the week. We have some painting to do in the small retail space, which is located between Toast and Brick and Mortar. So they'll be in there in a few days. And sad to say that Limelight is leaving us only because they have outgrown our space. They started with 7 when they moved in, and they're well over 20 employees now. And they have bought and remodeled the building right next to Signet, correct? And I think they're out in mid-July. So we'll be looking for new tenants to move in and take that space over. So very excited, but sad to see them leave.
Yeah, and to follow that up, Chad actually got a picture there of that progress. That's a couple of months ago. But to remind the residents that maybe were not watching the commission meeting when we presented that project, that's a great project. Brandy and Limelight Marketing currently at about 25 employees. They have plans to double that over the next couple of years. Starting wage is around $45,000, but their average wage is closer to $70,000. So you help them create a number of good-paying jobs. Not to mention the fact that they took a building that was dilapidated and now turning it into a nice new office building, and will be the headquarters for Limelight Marketing. Brandy actually has announced that the ribbon cutting for that will be the 10th of August, so it's coming up pretty quickly, and encourage the community to come out and support Limelight on that day. So just to wrap it up, a couple more projects that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. If you're driving down Broadway, you see the construction for the new Como Jewelry location. That's just south of Brahms. And you heard quite a bit about that at the last commission meeting, and I know the Comos appreciate the city's support. And then to wrap it up, other projects that the city has been able to help with, Jones Heritage, Fireplace Creations, we've got a groundbreaking for that project on Thursday of this week. Encourage everybody to come out and support that. And then the Blue Spoon that's moving into a brick and mortar location. So with that, Chad and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay,
Don,
thank you.
do you have any?
No questions, but I just want to congratulate the commission for, doing the wage survey and being part of that increase in wages that we were able to provide for our staff.
All right. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Blake.
Good job, guys.
All right. Moving on to consider the following. Imagine Pittsburgh, Grow Pittsburgh request. Consider the recommendation of the Economic Development Advisory Committee to allocate $150,000 from the revolving loan fund to startup costs that would allow Imagine Pittsburgh to establish Grow Pittsburgh, a new project in our a new community development corporation to support development projects in our community. All right, Blake, sorry.
Yeah, good evening again, Madam Mayor. Updates like that are a lot of fun, and it's been a long time in the making. I think you would agree that particularly over the last 10 years, our community has seen some pretty substantial growth. I can attribute a lot of it to a team approach to economic and community development. And a big part of that is Imagine Pittsburgh that started in 2010. While it initially came about from a chamber board meeting, very quickly the city was on board with it, Pittsburgh State, USD 250, our local business community, and it's because we're all on the same team working toward economic and community growth that we're now really seeing the fruits of that labor, and now have a lot of developers around the country looking to invest in Pittsburgh. And with Imagine Pittsburgh, in the beginning, there was some low-hanging fruit that was very easily identifiable, whose lane it fit in, whether it was the city or the chamber or the university or the school district or someone else. And we're now to a point, Imagine Pittsburgh is, where there are some large overarching projects that don't neatly fit into one of our lanes, and they're so big that quite honestly, each of our entities don't have the time necessarily to devote to it, to getting those done. And as Imagine Pittsburgh looked around at how other communities address those larger projects, they utilize what are called community development corporations, or CDCs. So we've got, I believe, the entire Imagine Pittsburgh Executive Committee, with the exception of Joe Della Sega, who had to be out of town, here with us tonight. And I want to ask Ron Skripczyk, who is the chair of Imagine Pittsburgh, to come up, and then we'll dig down into the details of what exactly a CDC is, because the Imagine Pittsburgh approached the Economic Development Advisory Committee for a request to help launch a CDC here in Pittsburgh. So, Ron, if you want to maybe speak on behalf of IP.
Hi, good evening, Ron Skripczyk. I did not campaign to be the chair of Imagine Pittsburgh, but Imagine Pittsburgh consists of probably about 25 volunteers that are enthusiastic about the progressive state that we're in, Pittsburgh, Kansas, and we want to really create a better community for everyone that lives in Pittsburgh, and also for those that are moving here. We really dream about making a better community. We dream about education, we dream about housing, infrastructure, economic development, and also marketing, to really drive Pittsburgh and let other people near Pittsburgh and throughout the United States that Pittsburgh really is a great community to live in. In the state of Kansas, there's already 145 community development corporations. So we're probably behind the curve on having one here in Pittsburgh. Of those 145 community development corporations, they own $32 million in assets, and they also generate $16 million of net income a year. So this is going to be a self-supporting, self-sustaining corporation that will own businesses, will own assets. We need the corporation so that we can receive and ask for federal funding, state funding, and also philanthropy to help support some of the projects that we want to do. So with that, Matt Burton knows the nuts and bolts of Community
Well, I got a
Development
question.
Corporation.
Is that 150,000, will that be repaid, or is that just a,
No, this is a grant.
The recommendation from the EDAC was that it would not be repaid.
so it's 75 a year for 2 years? Or is it 150,000 for 2 years every year?
They didn't necessarily parcel it out, they recommended the 150,
Total.
but knowing that it would last for 2 years. And real quickly, Commissioner, the agenda item mentions Grow Pittsburgh. This has been being discussed and kind of tossed around for a while. In the beginning, I think the name possibly was either Grow Pittsburgh or Develop Pittsburgh. In Matt's presentation, you'll see Develop Pittsburgh because the Imagine Pittsburgh group felt like that was a more appropriate name. So if there is a recommendation or if there is action from the City Commission tonight, we would ask that it be for Develop Pittsburgh rather than Grow Pittsburgh. Just wanted to make that clarification. Did I lose Matt? Oh, there you go. Yep.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Excited to be here. So my job, I guess, is to sort of talk through the details of what an organization like this would do. I'm going to cover a couple things. First, some just background. What is a community development corporation? Second, why in Pittsburgh? Third, to the degree there is one in Pittsburgh, how would it be structured? What would it look like? How would it function? And then fourth, based on the funding recommendations, if that's successful, next steps. You have this information, I believe, sent to you in advance, so I'm going to, for the sake of time, move quickly through that, but have as much time afterward to answer any questions that you'd have. So to start talking about community development corporations, we first have to start with the concept of community development, which is a really broad-based concept. It covers a whole range of different topics, but generally it refers to the process by which people come together to take collective action to generate solutions to common problems. It's also professional discipline, which means that there's a great deal of study and effort dedicated to it, which leads to resources that we can refer to, case studies, benchmarks, best practices, etc. Really, anything dealing with people collaborating and working together to make the community better can be put under the broad umbrella of community development, whether it's for social purposes, economic purposes, etc. The concept of community development moves forward to Community Development Corporation when Senator Robert Kennedy creates a special amendment to the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, which leads to the first Community Development Corporation, which is still in existence today in New York, the Bed-Stuy Renewal and Rehabilitation Corporation. And I think his sort of analysis is really appropriate to not only how this organization would move forward in Pittsburgh, but really to a lot of what's been done over the last number of years, which is about combining the best of the private world with the best of the public sector. So since that time, community development corporations have grown across the country. They tend to be organized as nonprofits. They tend to be focused on specific cities, even sometimes zeroing in on specific neighborhoods, usually with a focus on distressed areas that have experienced significant disinvestment. They often have a strong real estate component. They're most notably recognized as being involved with affordable housing. But again, based on that idea of community development being a very broad concept, they could be involved in a whole other range of issues depending on the particular focus of that organization. Those might range from commercial development to blight removal, streetscaping, childcare, neighborhood planning, etc., etc. The point is community development corporations function somewhat like private developers, but they're governed by the community. So a couple final things worth noting in this section. CDCs are self-identified. That means there's no specific IRS status or designation. There's also no governing national association or standards or formal certification process. Both of those really mean it's up to each individual organization to set its own mission. Most CDCs are nonprofits. However, they can be organized as private entities, or in some cases they can be organized as a nonprofit with several private subsidiaries. And finally, while CDCs certainly collaborate with local cities, they are never under the control of the city or division of any government entity. So, with that as sort of background, let's talk about the opportunity in Pittsburgh. So we obviously here have a rich tradition of civic pride and engagement, something that could very appropriately be called community development. I thought something that was worth pointing out, this is not a new concept, it's really in our bones and the DNA of this community. And I thought this quote from really more than 100 years ago sort of really captured the spirit of that. So I'm just going to read this one. Not every resident of Pittsburgh is wealthy, except in one respect. Bubbling up in the soul of everyone is a wealth of pride, which springs from the knowledge that he lives in a town which is full of spirit, which harbors the ambition to outstrip any of its neighbors. And I think a lot of that spirit is captured in what you heard from Blake and Ron around the creation and the success of Imagine Pittsburgh. And that spirit's led to a lot of remarkable progress in recent years. Many of you have been a part of that. I'm not going to read this whole list. It's in your packet, but it's significant. Despite that, we're still missing an important tool for building upon that recent success and, more importantly, sustaining it. And as Ron mentioned, that's a tool that's being used by more than 145 communities across the state of Kansas to really drive long-term impact in their communities and for the benefit of their citizens. But long-term impact requires local capacity. So we have a lot to be proud of here. There's a tremendous sense of momentum, but as much has been achieved already, the sense is that the opportunity ahead is even greater. We've been fortunate to get to this point. A lot of things have worked in our favor, but the threat is without a more coordinated or a more institutionalized local effort, we're going to miss the moment to not just build on that recent success, but more importantly, sustain it. And I just sort of did a quick sort of summary of my view of sort of some strengths and weaknesses in that regard. So one asset that the community has is this very strong, organized visioning and planning effort in Imagine Pittsburgh. It's noteworthy for a community of this size. There's a really strong platform of local development-related incentives and resources, not just financial, but people with time and energy. You now have an established track record of success, those recent projects we looked at, and increasingly a very engaged and supportive community in this regard. On the more sort of challenge side, and Blake mentioned this, you're finding implementation gaps. So certain types of project that there's not a clear home for where that goes. There's very limited local development capacity and expertise. One of the reasons for that is because of how high you are swinging, how high the ambitions are for the types of projects that you're undertaking, given the size of this community. There's just not the local development expertise or capacity to take on some of those projects. That often leads to uncoordinated and sometimes duplicative solicitation. So there's on the positive side, when we talk about local resources, some of those are very generous people, and a lot of times we're counting on the same people to participate in projects, but we're approaching them all individually in uncoordinated ways. And finally, there's some misconnections sometimes between needs and existing resources. As an example, sometimes there might be a need that's very social in its nature, childcare, education, etc. On the other hand, you have a need to redevelop spaces, properties, etc. They're often tackled separately. But if you can take a more overarching approach and be thinking about those things together, you might realize that the solution is in combining them sometimes. That all led to a handful of organizations coming together to try and create that local capacity through creating a community development corporation in Pittsburgh. So let's talk about then the recommendations we made for what that would look like at a very high level. We'll talk about the name, the board, the program focus, the organizational model, operational details, and then how it gets started. So as Blake mentioned, the name of the organization would be Develop Pittsburgh. Next thing that would have to happen is establishing a board of directors. So as a nonprofit, the CDC is required by law to have a board of directors. These are non-paid positions. Based on regulations in the state of Kansas, they have to have at least one. For IRS nonprofit status, there needs to be at least 3 directors. We thought the board should be comprised, to start with, of representatives from those partnering organizations that we mentioned, so the city, the chamber, the university, the school district, and Imagine Pittsburgh. Next, community stakeholders, and then over time, that board can certainly increase and should include people who may be making investments in some of those projects. Finally, the initial board and number of seats, as I mentioned, could expand over time. So you'll see sort of those partnering organizations and then some community stakeholder spots in the group of people that Ron and others asked to participate and who have accepted the invitation to serve on this board. Next is the focus. So again, community development is a broad subject area. So how do we drill in for what we think is needed in Pittsburgh at the moment? We bullet pointed a couple key areas. First, commercial mixed-use redevelopment and housing infill in the downtown and University Overlay District. Affordable and workforce housing. Strategically important development projects. So as Blake mentioned, especially as it relates to Pittsburgh, imagine Pittsburgh, and there might be a focus on tourism or other sorts of things where there's a need for a specific type of development that just doesn't have a natural home, and so we wanted one of the buckets to sort of be able to address those things. And then finally, development and support for other community priorities. So next you'll see sort of what we suggested as a model for how this organization would be put together. At the top you have obviously the board. So as a nonprofit, this organization is governed by a board of directors. Underneath there is the actual corporation. We use corporation because it sounds official. Please note that this is a nonprofit corporation, not a private corporation. Underneath that nonprofit, there might be a private subsidiary created depending on the needs of certain types of projects. Long term, but not initially, it's envisioned there would be a president or an executive director or what title you want to give that person, and then some degree of professional staff. Usually the amount of professional staff running an organization like this is relatively small. Over time, as they develop projects, if they have an ownership stake in any of those projects, most of the staff would be people you would associate being involved with properties and their maintenance and upkeep, etc. It's possible that depending on the project, that organization might create an individual project LLC, which they would have a stake in underneath which the staff would report up to. This next sort of slide just kind of gives a summary of underneath that sort of scope of work, here's how the organization would actually function and how it would expect to generate revenue for itself. So first, secure strategically important properties so they can be redeveloped. Too often those properties are left to chance or given up in tax sales and end up unused. Second, in some cases, their role would be to solicit, having control of that property, an outside private developer to redevelop it. In other cases, the CDC might partner with a private developer on a project that it makes sense to have a locally based entity and or a nonprofit. So there are people with means who want to contribute to certain projects getting done. There are grant programs that are dedicated to certain types of development projects. However, private entities aren't able to receive those types of funds. So sometimes putting together a private developer with a nonprofit developer allows you to maximize the benefit for the project. Or in other cases, especially smaller projects, the CDC might be the developer themselves and receive the full benefit that comes from that project. In terms of income then, some of those properties that they acquire, that they might bring in an outside developer to develop, they would receive the income from selling that property to that developer. If they partner on the project with the developer, they would receive a portion of the developer fees that are paid to that project. If they maintain that ownership position in a project, either in partnership with a private developer or on their own, they would receive the benefit of any income, if there is any, generated from that property. Finally, administrative fees from various grant programs, and then private and philanthropic donations. I think the point of that is, this is kind of a well-established model, so that with this seed money, there is a means by which this organization can sustain itself long-term. So then last, sort of moving forward and getting started, kind of the next steps. So one, the organization needs to secure the necessary professional partners, such as legal and accounting firms. With that in place, They can work with those partners to get registered with the state of Kansas as a nonprofit. Once they're registered with the state of Kansas as a nonprofit, they can apply for a 501c3 status with the IRS. After that's done, they'll start to work on developing their initial priorities and projects. I'm sorry, I've got a repeat typo there. And then begin full-time operations. So having worked through all of that, I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions that I or Blake or Ron or any of the other members of the board can answer.
I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
Can you, first of all, this is gonna be purely a nonprofit organization?
Yes, sir.
Nobody's gonna make any money on it, right?
No.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit, and the board you saw listed on there, so.
Well, the community should make a profit on this. This should be self-sustaining, and the community that owns the CDC should make a profit, but the board of directors or any of us individuals will not make a profit,
On any of the projects?
any of the projects.
Okay. Next question is governance. The Board of Governors of the board that's, that you're going to appoint will govern. Now, who does the oversight of that board?
The IRS in the state of Kansas.
Okay. So they come in and they.
Every
figure out what-
nonprofit's required by law. Those directors have fiduciary responsibility, by law, so they're personally accountable. And both the IRS and the state of Kansas have required, that would be the same for this organization as Habitat for Humanity or the United Way or the American Red Cross in terms of how they report donations received and expenses and how that information is made available to the public.
And the last one is, can you give us a couple of examples of some cities and what they've done with this?
Go ahead.
You know, a good example is Bentonville, Arkansas. They've been active in the Community Development Corporation for a long time. They've got downtown revitalization. They've got senior housing. They've got affordable housing. Other examples across the state of Kansas, there's been child care facilities built for with the Community Development Corporation. There's been youth sports complexes. Revitalization of certain parts of the city. So those are different examples that have already exist in the state of Kansas and Bentonville.
And Commissioner, if I could, to kind of further expand upon that, an example, not only Bentonville, Arkansas, but Northwest Arkansas. I began my chamber career there about 25 years ago, and at that time, each of the 5 communities that make up Northwest Arkansas, they all have chambers, they all have cities, they all have good people that are working hard, but those individuals were so busy with their projects that no one was looking at regional air transportation, the arts, recreation. So the Northwest Arkansas Council was created, and it was supported not only by those communities, but some of the bigger corporations in that area. And that Northwest Arkansas Council, which is a CDC, is what's responsible for landing the Northwest Arkansas Regional Airport that some of our residents here fly out of. Crystal Bridges, the museum in Bentonville. Some of those larger projects that each of the communities weren't able to get done on their own, because the CDC spends time up here looking at these overarching projects, the CDC was able to get those done.
Okay, and then, of course, another question is how much, I don't know how to phrase it, the city would have no fiscal responsibility here.
The city would have a seat.
Other than this month, the seed money.
That's correct.
Okay, and there was one other question that I forgot. Too many questions. And who would report, who do you report to, I guess? I know you have a board of governors, and who do you report to? Would you make reports to the city and tell us your progress and what's going on and stuff like that?
I would think typically with CDC, and CDCs want the community to know what they're working on and the successes that they have.
Well, I mean, would the chamber report to us?
Well, the city will have a representative on this board.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the city would be a part of all those decisions.
That's what
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering. All right,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Ultimately, they really report up to Imagine Pittsburgh, which is that 25 group of people, of business people and professional people.
But those aren't the people that are gonna ask us questions, by and large.
The city will
They're
have.
they're already gonna know. So we'd like to have information to pass along as the commissioners, you know.
As you well
We
should.
get questions
Sure.
every day from people, so.
As you well should.
Okay, thank you.
I have so I think you stated that this would not be under any control of city government.
That's correct.
Then I have a couple other questions. So if the city owns property and you guys have had the funds to pay for that, the big projects, what's that do to the little guy developer that wants some property to develop also? Who would the ones with, on this board or this development be able to purchase the ground and the little guy can't? What I'm trying to get at.
Well, I guess I would want to hear an example. Let me just talk out loud for a second, see if I can get to your question.
Matt, you may want to come back up.
Oh, sorry.
Explain.
I think what's really important, there's a couple reasons that communities want to have an organization like this. One is to achieve certain things. So as Blake gave you some examples and we talked about the sort of significance of the opportunities in front of the community, right? So this is just a tool that a community might have along with a lot of other tools that it would have, such as economic development activities and so forth to sort of, achieve progress. And that's one thing. But the second reason a community sometimes has an organization like this, and just personally why I think it's so important for Pittsburgh, is because it allows the community to be the owner of that success. So right now, whether it's a little guy or a big guy, all of that success is typically owned and oftentimes by people outside of this community. So this is a local organization governed by local people whose mission is to support the growth of Pittsburgh locally and whose mandate is to reinvest any success from those projects back into future projects in Pittsburgh. So I think really what the focus is about is this organization is not there to compete, again, with little or big guys. Their mission is to fill a void and to cause development to happen. And so if there's a little guy that wants to develop a project, I think that's part of their mission. Again, sort of one of the first kind of scopes of work is to get property redeveloped. So I'm not sure that it would be typically a competitive situation in that sort of scenario.
So if we decide to do this, that would probably benefit your best hotel, wouldn't it? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It could very well. I think from a private developer standpoint, organizations like this are both beneficial and sometimes frustrating. They're beneficial because when you have a clear local partner to work with, that's helpful. And right now there are a lot of organizations that are trying to partner with projects, so whether that be the city or the chamber, but they have certain roles to play, right? It's not their job to be community developer. So having a local entity is helpful. Obviously that means you're giving up part of the ownership, the pie, the success, whatever, for the sake of that local entity. But I think for any sort of outside developer, this is generally a positive thing.
Could you put your finger on the one main thing that would be top priority of this group?
I don't feel like that's my place. I certainly have thoughts. I feel like that's probably people who would be on the board to speak to some of that.
Yeah, Commissioner, we've, the group here, behind me, the board of directors and the other people in Imagine Pittsburgh, I mean, we've thrown out a lot of ideas. We really have. We have not prioritized that list. We've got a laundry list. We want to make sure that we do our market survey, a feasibility study, a business plan of anything before I want to probably throw it on the floor. But I will say this, the majority of what we've talked about is really improving the quality of life for our youth. All the way from childcare, all the way through schools. We want to create great memories that they grew up in Pittsburgh and they just love Pittsburgh, so that when they graduate from college, start a family, maybe they'll come back so their family can enjoy some of the same things.
I'm glad you mentioned childcare, because that seems to be one of our major
It's a major,
priorities.
it's a major
And
goal.
I'd like to see that, somehow this could help that out.
Gentlemen, I'd just like to say thank you. Gentlemen, I'd just like to say thank you for the presentation. It's a great, a lot of work's gone into it. I've done some research when I found out about this, it's gonna be on the agenda. I was skeptical at first, but through the research and through your presentation, I think every once in a while, a community and particularly a city commission who represents the citizens that elected us, I think we have a chance to, every once in a while, we have a monumental event, and have a chance to be part of it. I truly believe this is one of them. I think this is something that's missing from our community. Matt, I love the quote from 1901 from the Topeka paper. I think that summarizes the city of Pittsburgh and surrounding immediate community. I think that's the spirit of Pittsburgh, the essence of what we do. We just find a way to do this, and I commend you gentlemen and everybody that's on your board of directors, your proposed board of directors. I think it's like I said before, a monumental opportunity for Pittsburgh to move forward and fill the void that we're currently missing, I think, in this particular area.
And so, Madam Mayor, as you all know, the Economic Development Advisory Committee is the body that you appoint to screen all requests for that Economic Development Incentive Fund called the Revolving Loan Fund. So they did have a very similar discussion and conversation a couple of weeks ago. They did recommend approval of the $150,000 in seed money to get the CDC started up. So I am bringing that recommendation to you tonight.
I so move that we go ahead with the loan.
I gladly second it.
Okay, Don and I haven't had a chance to
Oh,
ask.
sorry.
Oh,
No offense, but Don, do you have any questions?
Excuse me, no questions, just, we've done incredible things through volunteers with Imagine Pittsburgh, and I think this is the next step to give us the infrastructure to make the ideas that our citizens have come to fruition. Just one example might be, the work that USD 250 launch program did, the spot. There's no one, at this point that can develop that. The school's not going to, the city can't. So it's kind of unique situations like that where a CDC would be able to make some of those things come to fruition. So I would echo Stu and Sigley. I appreciate the presentation, and I think it's a good step.
All right, and I'm just looking at my notes here. I don't want to double back on, so you're not in direct competition with the city at all. You're just enhancing and helping the things that, they have stuff set up, but you're outside their realm.
I think the idea is to allow everyone to more comfortably play their appropriate roles. So one of the strengths that the community has is a number of development-related incentives, and the city's job, I think where they play best, and probably where you feel like they play best, is in being able to administer those incentives without having to get too far out and try and play developer. And so this allows an organization to come in and fill that void and work with the local entities, whoever those may be, to leverage those incentives for the benefit of the community.
There will be a lot of collaboration between the CDC and the city of Pittsburgh, Kansas.
So, again, tell me, how did you intend to produce the revenue to support the projects?
So organizations like this, and this one in particular, we would anticipate would generate money a couple of different ways. So if they are acquiring property that sort of is viewed as strategically important and trying to find a developer for that, right? And mostly that's just to protect that property and to find a developer, and they sell that property, then that's the first sort of source of income. If they're playing a development role in a project, either as a partner or with an organization, oftentimes large projects may pay a developer fee. Well, if they're the co-developer, that would be a fee that would come to them. Third, if they're maintaining an ownership stake in that project, and there's an income stream from that, and let's say it's an affordable housing project and there's income that's coming through that project, and they're a part owner or the sole owner of that, they would be receiving that. And then finally, oftentimes, with various grant programs or tax incentives. There is an administrative fee that goes with administering that. And then finally, there obviously is the opportunity for philanthropic donations. The bulk of the expenses for an organization like this are usually project-based. Again, long-term, the overhead, just as a core professional organization, is not significant. And so most of the expenses are tied to developing individual projects, and that's how donations are driven and motivated.
The grants that you were talking about, I know Jay's always looking and going after grants. Are you in competition with that? Or do you work together whenever there's something that comes up that maybe Jay is saying that it can benefit us all? Or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I would think, as Ron said, I would think that, and it's the reason the partnering organizations were brought together the way they were, because the only way for an organization like this to really be successful is if it's collaborating with the city, the chamber, Imagine Pittsburgh, et cetera. I think they would play different roles. So again, most of this organization's work would be around development, so things that the city isn't doing. It's there to support, but not doing those things. And a lot of those grant programs or tax incentives are specifically related to the project, not so much the organization.
Okay.
And so they're going to be tied to, development of a child care facility might bring with it certain incentives that are tied to that project.
What are the transformational development projects that you're looking at?
I think, again, I got to defer to.
We, like I said before, we've got a lot of ideas. We've not vetted them. We're not ready to make that presentation yet on specific projects. As I stated earlier, the ones that are on the foremost of our list have to do with childcare, experiences of youth growing up, and education in Pittsburgh. So those are the foremost top priority of our list right now.
Okay. And so the public needs to understand too what it is so they can get on board also, and what it is that we're going to do and how's it going to benefit the city. So do you plan on having like meetings that people can come to, like a town hall meeting of sorts, that or anything like that? Is it that the general public can be a part of it and know what's going on?
Well, let me give you an example of one that is really exciting. In fact, we went up to Kansas City and we visited a soccer complex up there, and we actually visited with this soccer director of Johnson County, and that's a similar type project to where the one facility up there brought in 1,200,000 people a year. They're traveling teams, so they brought in, they spent hotels, restaurants, shopping, and everything else. So that's kind of an example of a type of community development corporation that may fit for us, going forward.
And if I can, and so the reason you have an organization like that, like this, for a project like that is a couple-fold. Locally, there's just not an entity with the capacity to drive something like that. So then you end up completely relying on an external entity to determine that that's an opportunity they want to pursue here, which is great when outside developers want to come here, but there's no local stake. So there's a local entity that's identifying that as a key priority and then trying to drive it forward by either taking the role of finding the development partners and letting them do the work, or partnering with them, or determining they can do the development themselves. And then the second reason it's important for an organization with a project like that is oftentimes that takes again, as a community, I think one of the things that's noteworthy is how high you're swinging, right? And so to do that, you've got to bring together a lot of resources. That might be traditional things that you'd think of, like loans or equity investment. It might be things like some of the local incentives you have in the way of the EDAC or property tax abatements. It might be things like state or federal tax credits. It might be donations. It might be people saying, hey, we think, we want something like this in our community. We'd be willing to contribute a little bit of money to it. And so a private entity is just not set up to handle that range of resources all on its own. So an organization like this, for a small town, drives that initiative forward and then provides the means to bring together that whole collection of various funding resources that would be required to do something like that for the benefit of the community.
Mayor, to your question,
I think-
that's right. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Sorry. I'm following up on Cheryl's point. This doesn't replace Imagine Pittsburgh.
No.
At least in my mind, it doesn't. That is the Community Foundation for Strategic Planning, which was kind of sidelined during COVID, but we certainly have very robust town halls, and I don't see the CDC replacing Imagine Pittsburgh in that
Okay.
process.
Okay.
Am I reading this right?
I think you are, yeah.
I think wow, I feel like I'm talking to, I'm Elvis all of a sudden, my voice is going boom. Number one, I think if we have 150, if the taxpayers have 150,000 into it, I think that's maybe part of your question is, how do we know what's going on? And I think that's where regular reporting, either through the quarterly reports, the EDAC, whatever, however we report back on those projects. The second one is, I do think when you drill down into the projects, like Don's saying, whether it's town halls through IP or whether it's, I can't envision a situation where, say they were going to build a new community center in Pittsburgh, that the architects of that project wouldn't have open meetings and get feedback. So I do think that would come at a time. It's not the kind of, I think the purpose of the organization in general is it doesn't have that 20,000 taxpayer oversight on it because it is its own not-for-profit and can do things. But I do think there'd be a tremendous opportunity with any project to say, hey, we want to get we're thinking of building this to the businesses or the citizens. What do you want in it? What would you think about it being over here versus over here? What if it was made of straw versus clay? I think that's a decent answer to that public side, because I think that's the big question for us is if we've got taxpayer money in it, what's in it? How do we respond to our taxpayers about how that money's being used?
So the relationship between the city and the CDC, I noticed there's a lot of overlap on, say, like your members, and because we are a small town too. How do you get away from any conflict of sorts in that respect with the overlap? Like, say, if somebody is with the city, the county, the chamber, and then they're also on the board also. I know it takes everybody, but how do you get away from the conflict if ever?
Well, I think,
Well, if there's a potential conflict, we shouldn't be looking at that project.
Oh, okay,
I mean, that's a short way of answering other things.
sure. So.
And that's part of what will be vetted, in the board of directors, who has a member of the Chamber of Commerce, who has a member of the city of Pittsburgh, who has USD 250, and also the university on that. So we feel like we've got a well-represented group of Pittsburgh and then also the business people in Pittsburgh to eliminate those potential conflicts.
So it's a diverse group.
Okay. Go back to that page.
And then as far as, the members and, like you said, stakeholders, shareholders, tell me more about that. Is that further down the line?
I'm sorry.
Or I saw it said stakeholders and shareholders, or how does that fall? I mean, will there at some point be more stakeholders, shareholders type?
Well, so I think always with this, there's the balance, and I think Darren spoke to this, of just the organization itself as an entity and then individual projects. And I think, as the organization grows, it's quite possible that the board expands in size a little bit, and as it does, I think every organization's asking itself, who are the primary stakeholders for the work that we do? And in this case, those initial stakeholders were identified as these entities. Then you have individual projects, which have their own then stakeholders, and sometimes are even organized separately as their own LLC. And so that it's a broad term. I think more specifically, one of the things you might be asking within there is there might be then people who are donating large amounts of money to individual projects or providing investments for individual projects, and you certainly think of those people in that regard, for sure.
Okay. So this is not going to affect the revenue of the city, it's going to help it?
The idea is that your revenue as a city is driven by economic activity. And so you have a lot, as you saw from that report, economic activity happening right now. And you've had a lot of success over the last 10 years, especially. This organization is simply envisioned to try and build on that success. Sort of go from that low-hanging fruit that Blake described to start tackling some of the hairier ones and sustain it. And as it does, that should be, driving sales tax revenue and increasing property values and all the sorts of things that you want.
But you would potentially, as the entity that gives out incentives, we could theoretically be asked on any project, Mayor, to contribute like we are with anything else.
Okay.
That's correct.
This is really a business, it really is, and the intention is that this business is going to make some money. Even though we're nonprofits, we can still generate net income. And if we generate net income, we could help the city with some specific projects, beautify Pittsburgh or improve the entrance of Pittsburgh or
Wastewater treatment plant?
You need a lot of money.
Well, I tell you what, Commissioner, that's, you're kind of setting the bar a little high there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's see, I don't know that there was anything else. But it'll always be a nonprofit, right? Is what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I don't have any further questions. And you made the motion to approve, and who seconded it? I didn't. Stu seconded? All right, no more questions? All right, motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks for your support.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you. All right. All right, 4th of July firework display contract. Consider staff recommendation to utilize city funds in the amount of $18,700 for the annual 4th of July fireworks show to be provided by J&M Displays Incorporated.
Madam Mayor, Commission, good evening.
Good evening.
It's time for the annual fireworks show, and this year we have two sponsors that I'd like to bring out to the public, Kansas Crossing Casino and Al Patel of Food Discount Liquor and Dairy Queen have helped defray the cost of the fireworks show, bringing it to the $18,700 number.
Move to accept.
I had a question, Toby. Do our stands, when they pay permits to operate a firecracker stand, do they also help pay for the display?
Absolutely, I think we had four. We
Four
had four
stands?
permitted, so yeah.
And it's 5,000?
Yeah, we're in pretty good shape there
Yeah.
too.
All right.
So that's 20, but you said 18,700 is all
Yep.
they're asking, but part of that is the donations?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Who, it was moved by Doc,
Yeah, I second it.
second by Chuck. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Toby. All right. Non-agenda reports and requests. Darren?
We got a couple. Take us to 10 o'clock, Matt.
All right. I'll only be 2 to 5 hours. Hey, so a couple things. This week, you will see Friday, we will have a press release for bulk item pickup for again this year. That will come out on Friday. We will open up the C-Clicks Fix portal like we did last year. This year, we're only gonna accept box springs and mattresses and furniture. So that will be it. We will close the C-Click Fix portal on Thursday. I forgot the date, sorry, but it'll be posted on the media release. And we will pick up on the 18th of July. Monday, the 18th, City Crews will begin the pickup. So everyone will have to have if they're registered, they will have to have it curbside by 8 a.m. Monday, the 18th. And that press release will come out Friday. For that. And as well as the C-Click Fix portal, they can also call in the customer service desk and they will take that information. We will ask for address, we will ask for a water account just to verify. citizenship and the, you know, you're the tenant of the property. We'll set all that up to go. The other thing is today we released, we also had a public meeting, press release go out for our East Quincy project. As promised within the contract documents, we are gonna hold a public meeting, next Thursday, the 7th, at between 5 and 7 PM, kind of a come and go. We'll have the contractor there as well as the engineer and city staff to answer any other questions. And kind of let everyone know project status around 6 o'clock that night. We'll do a short presentation of just all the project, just the quick overview of the project details. And anyone's welcome to come and ask questions of the project. So
Is that Memorial? That's at Memorial?
that is at Pittsburgh Nazarene Church on
Open, yes, okay.
816 East Quincy. The church is graciously hosting that for us, so, or letting us use their facility so the residents in the area can get there.
Matt,
So, but we will have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor earlier.
I have a
that
quick question on Fourth Street overpass. It looks to me like it's getting really close. Is there a timeline on that still?
I have, the last I talked to KDOT, that's KDOT project, but last I talked to KDOT, they were shooting for the end of July. So, but I haven't heard I mean, they're getting there, so
Just
as long as it
curious.
stays dry, that's gonna help.
Just curious.
Yeah,
Getting close.
yeah. So, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Matt.
Yep.
That's all we
Darren,
got.
anything else? No? Anybody else? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Doc, seconded.
Let Dawn. Hey, Dawn.
Don, you want to second that?
I second,
Okay.
I'm here.
We are, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Everyone have a great evening.
Happy Fourth.
Thank you.